Meetings go way back to pizza parlors, chatting about GIS over some dinner, and so we've kind of now morphed these into this latest series.
And we were in Pittsburgh, and we were doing some community organizing, and we were talking to a local minister about a proposed incinerator in Pittsburgh, and we had this map that showed, this is where they want to put the incinerator, and this is where all the African Americans are. And it was just like, he was like, yeah, it's dead in the middle. And like, I'm a numbers person, but like oftentimes like pure numbers and, charts and tables, like they only get so far. So you need maps.
We're really interested in the Justice Map project, and we were introduced to it through some classes at Shasta College, and we're interested in the story behind it. And so here we have the person who created it, Kreider, and we're excited about talking to him about how and why he came up with the Justice Map and what it entails.
Yeah, and welcome, Aaron. I'm Dan Scollon. I'm the program coordinator and instructor for our Geographic Information Systems program here at Shasta College, and we appreciate you taking the time for a chat today. And maybe you can just start off by telling us a little bit about your background and how you got into doing this GIS work.
Yeah, so I guess I have a background in multiple things. I don't know. I was in a PhD program for sociology, ended up with a master's degree, and decided to go into web development because it was a lot more. I had some computer science experience. I taught myself computer programming, and I saw some opportunities around 2002, 2001, when everything was going a little bit crazy with the internet. And I had some ideas of some websites that I wanted to get into. And that eventually led me to doing, so I guess I had a website called campusactivism.org. And around 2002, I was trying to create a social network for activists, or a network for activists. It wasn't all that social, but and so as part of that, I wanted to be able to map it. I wanted to be able to map, because a classic thing is to show that people and groups are near each other. So then I started using Google Maps for that. Several years later, campusactivism.org was kind of winding down, and I kind of forked the software to work with some friends at the Energy Justice Network, and they wanted to use kind of what I'd done with campus activism, but with like their network of people who are fighting dirty power plants. So they wanted a map of people, groups, and power plants, which was the big addition to the whole effort. So I did a lot of work with power plant information from the federal government, mapping all of them and putting them in different layers. And I don't know. I've always been a bit more of a web developer than a GIS person, but.
You went from sociology to more to having more of a focus on web development, and yet you continued with your activism and your focus on social issues. How much of your foundation in social, it seems like they're really inextricably entwined to me. Do you see them separate, or do you see them intertwined? How do you see them within your life?
So my, major goal in life is to, help make a better world. And I've, if I'm into sociology, it's because of that. If I'm into, I study sociology, economics, and computer science. So I've always kind of had my fingers in several different pots.
And so you spoke a little earlier about that your involvement with the Energy Justice Network, that you had friends that were already working there. Is that how it was? And that's what brought you in? And the Sunlight Foundation, you were working initially, and now you're volunteering in terms of your upkeep of that program, that project. Is that?
Yeah. Energy Justice Network. I was in graduate school. I got involved in an organization called the Student Environmental Action Coalition, which was a national network of student environmental justice organizations in the U.S. that existed from about 1990, 2003. Anyways, some of my friends from the Energy Justice Network, I'd known them from the Student Environmental Action Coalition. Yeah. So it was kind of funny, actually. The people in Energy Justice, I'd worked with one of the guys, Mike Ewall, on recreating the Student Environmental Action Coalition database. So the organization had an organizational crisis and like lost access to its database, and like so we created a new database. That database that he then used for Energy Justice Network. I used a version of it for campusactivism.org. And then I merged it back into the Energy Justice database and put their database, which was this like access database, and I turned it onto this online database where they could access it remotely, so that they could, because it's kind of a decentralized organization. So they found that very useful. And also, so it also has a private part to it, and then it has a public part where we're trying to map data. So it's this like giant database. And but yeah.
Great project.
You know, that, Aaron, you know, as somebody who also has a computer science background, I, of course, am interested in kind of the under the hood aspect of things. Are you seeing the justice map up on my screen at the moment? Just wanted to confirm that. And so, can you talk a little bit about the sort of foundation from which you built this? Were you working in Postgres? What are some of the tools that you were using? How did you build the database?
Yeah.
How did you? And maybe a dovetail question to that is where you accessed the data that is associated with the map.
Yeah. So one of the key product that made the whole thing really possible was TileMill. They create raster blocks, raster image tiles from geospatial data, and you can do shape files, or you can use Postgres. I went with Postgres because I think it was faster. And also the data set gets very large when you go all the way down to the block size. The data set is somewhere in the, I don't know, 5 to 10 gigabytes area for all the blocks. So yeah, there's two main data sets. Both of them are from the Census Bureau. One is the decennial census, which I got from the census. And then the other is the income layer, which is from the American Community Survey, which I got from the University of Missouri. Has a Dexter data tool, which I found very useful to extract stuff from the American Community Survey. Yeah, and other than that, I used Google Maps because I was familiar with it. Unfortunately, they have since gone to a paid product, so I'm now paying a little bit of money for their API usage after like 10 years or even 12 years of like, you know. So I do want to move it over to open source mapping, like OpenStreetMap or something. And then I'm using jQuery for a JavaScript library to do a lot of stuff. I think those are the main elements.
Yeah, your resourcefulness at deploying these different tools is commendable. And if I could maybe just quickly as a follow-up question, you know, I think it's you've done a very effective job of representing in this opening map this complex mosaic of racial groups in the United States, and Lisa's in a cartography class right now. We've used the Color Brewer website to sort of talk about how you can ramp up different things. How did you inform the cartography on this this map?
The colors I think came from the racial dot map.
Yeah.
And the racial categories, there was one or other racial category that they considered adding, which is other.
Yeah.
But there's a strong core, and this was based on the 2010 census too, which is of course very different from the 2020 census, when like multiracial and some other categories just grew tremendously. So, but and the other thing was, I think, there's Pacific Islander, which I may or may not have lumped in with Asian.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but the problem with the other categories, it seemed like it was very much a Hispanic category, and so I didn't really want to do the same thing twice.
It'd be interesting to see if that has changed from the 2010 census to the 2021, because there was such a great increase in that category of other. It'd be interesting to maybe have a side-by-side comparison of the two. You know what I mean? To see if how that affects the map. You know?
Yeah, and there's a real problem with one of the great balances that I was trying to do with this project was balancing. I wanted a tool that like I would want to use that has all these features. And balancing that and making it usable was like this big challenge. So that's kind of why I have a whole bunch of stuff buried under advanced, kind of an advanced view. But I just, I mean, there are these, I think they're like, I don't know, when the government makes a tool like this, the first thing they do is they put up a big, do you agree to our terms of service notification? Right. And like, I wanted the map, straight right there. And I wanted people to see that it was like relatively complex, and that there were a lot of different options. But yeah, I mean, like one of the great challenges for this project is how to represent multiracial people and people who don't just fit, into a single category. And right. Like that's going to be the growing trend in the United States. And we're going to need more and more layers.
I think you just made several really important points about mapping and just communicating complex issues like this in general. First, you expressed that you wanted something that you would want to use, or and that you could use, right?
Yeah.
And then second, just the complexity of something like this. On the one hand, you want something that's usable and that isn't going, someone's not going to need a manual to figure out how to use it. On the other hand, it is a complex issue, and that is part of the message, is letting people know that it's complex, right? And it's a fine line to balance that and give people a chance to learn and explore, and yet not have them be frustrated because they don't understand what they're looking at or how they're supposed to use it.
Yeah.
So this was a big task you had.
Yeah.
If I could, Aaron, can you talk a little bit about application of this tool? You've talked about the Energy Justice Network, and the fact that we've got what is often referred to as environmental racism. If you take some place like the San Pablo Bay area that I'm pointing to here in Contra Costa County, where you've got a lot of oil refineries and the minority populations that are exposed to these kinds of toxins, and has the map been applied to specific cases yet? And if so, how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't, to be honest, I really don't know how it's being used. I get some feedback, but it's, I don't really have much of a marketing program. We do get some, perhaps our biggest marketing program is we're in the Google Ads grants program. So I've made full use of that, and we're getting a lot of free advertising on the Google Grants thing, which is great. So I mean, the most familiar use, so I know a lot of people are using it in schools. A lot of people are using it for research. But I mean, I get an email, and then people tend to not follow up too well. So I don't get to see the final product, which is unfortunate, because I would love to see anyone using this. I would absolutely love to see, research papers, articles, presentations, whatever. So the main use that I'm most familiar with is Energy Justice Network, and they use it to show the demographics of where proposed and existing dirty power plants are, and to demonstrate environmental racism, environmental justice. One of the cool things that kind of I spinned off was the spatial justice test, where you can really do a where you can look at, say, all the operating coal power plants in the United States and see who lives near all the operating coal power plants, or the trash incinerators, which are like one of the things that we specialize in fighting, is because trash incinerators are among the dirtiest. And,
Right.
I'm in Philadelphia, and there's my friends have been fighting this trash incinerator in Chester, Pennsylvania, which I think is the largest in the U.S. or close to the largest, for over 20 years. As have citizens of Chester, Pennsylvania, and it's a low-income African American community, and they get their trash imported from Philadelphia and others and burned in their their neighborhood, and it's a disgrace. But yeah, I mean, the impetus for creating Justice Map was based on environmental justice, and wanting to visualize it. And this one time I spent with Mike, and we were in Pittsburgh, and we were doing some community organizing, and we were talking to a local minister about a proposed incinerator in Pittsburgh, and we had this map that showed, this is where they want to put the incinerator, and this is where all the African Americans are. And it was just like, he was like, yeah, it's it's dead in the middle. Like, and like, I'm a numbers person, but like oftentimes like pure numbers and charts and tables, like they only get so far. So you need maps.
Sure.
And so, and then I realized, then I ran into the tile mill software, and then I realized that like this data set is fascinating, and just has so many implications, and like everybody should know about like the race and income in their community, and it helps.
I'm wondering, I definitely, given the conversation we had before, I come definitely justice and equity, and how they're interconnected, intertwined with environmental issues, and just how environmental issues are social issues, and economic issues. They're all interconnected. Given that, I'm wondering what if there are other sort of justice projects or other projects that you're involved with now, or that you're interested in exploring, other social issues that you're interested in tackling as well.
Yeah, it ranges from on a GIS front. My longstanding interest is to take basically the entire American Community Survey and map the entire American Community Survey.
Wow.
So yeah, that could be several hundred to several thousand variables.
Yeah.
So that could take a lot of computer power. As a side note, one of the things that really made this project possible is the advancement of solid state disk technology, because there are hours and hours of grinding out, well, literally days of grinding out tiles, and the solid state disks just crushed the regular hard drives by 10 to 1, sometimes even 100 to 1. But yeah, so kind of doing this in some ways what Census Reporter is doing, but they're an amazing project, great website, and they have the American Community Survey, and they do kind of have it mapped, but you can't see it in the same way that you can on Justice Map. You can't see an entire country at a time, and often you can't even see, if you're California, you might have trouble seeing the whole state because they have some limits on their API and various things.
Aaron, can you repeat the resource that you just mentioned?
Censusreporter.org.
Thank you.
It's designed for data journalists, and they've got an open source implementation of the American Community Survey, They actually don't do the decimal census, which is interesting. But it gets very complicated because for income, for instance, there are dozens of income variables. And even for things like, so I'd love to map income, I'd love to map rent, I'd love to map country of origin, age, gender, or sex is maybe less interesting, might get more interesting in the future, hopefully. Otherwise you see a lot of prisons and you see a lot of like single sex, schools if you do a map of sex currently in the US. But age, education, all that stuff is in the American Community Survey. And
it's a wealth of information. So are you thinking along the lines of keeping a justice map which will have different toggles, or are you thinking from the cartography GIS standpoint, are you thinking of having separate maps on the same website, or not sure yet? Or
I really don't know. I've just I've done some estimates on how long things will take. I think one of the big differences I need to transition from using raster tiles to vector tiles. And like, I mean, because justice map, like the entire data set now, especially with like the 2 decimal censuses, I think it might be around 200 gigabytes. So it's like I'm running everything off of 2 cheap servers located in Quebec, which is quite funny. But so there's, I don't know, so the thing about raster tiles or vector tiles is that they can take up a lot less space. And also you can dynamically style them, and that's what the people who made Tile Mill, I keep forgetting the maps, but they've moved to vector tiles, as have I think almost everybody. Like even Google Maps is using vector tiles. It could be two different tools. It could be one tool. It's hard to say.
Sorry to interrupt you, but a question that I had is, have you had any considerations towards putting to dialing this down to the census tract level, and is that also a issue of sort of processing and the ability to be able to actually serve up that resolution of data? And then if I can just quickly, and if you're able to speak to this question of whether you have heard of or have the ability to be able to provide sort of a REST endpoint. I just went in and they've got PowerPoints of the United States, which I can just launch. They've also got Census Bureau data, and I have the ability to be able to bring in web services, GeoJSONs and so forth, that I can actually pull in something like your data set. And then if I were to bring it in on top of something like the PowerPoint's data set, then suddenly I'd be in a position where I could say, all right, well, there's a great example. So, if I could take your data set and pull it in underneath this data set, suddenly I've got this much greater potential for analysis and application of your tool.
Yeah. So to start, what browser are you using?
Let's see here. I think I may be bouncing back and forth here a little bit, but yeah, I'm in Chrome.
Now so Justice Map, the data is available at the census tract level, it's available at the county level, it's available at the block group level, it's available at the block. I mean, it's kind of on it's on my like ideal list of things to do. I mean, I'm just it's a lot of work, and like I don't know. So like doing the 2020 census kind of like burned me out. And then I was kind of hoping, I don't know, I was one of the first people to have the 2020, like I had it mapped about the same time like ESRI had it mapped, like I had it mapped with so I was kind of hoping that I would get some publicity, but I don't really have any PR department. So I'm motivated by, compliments and people using it, and you know,
Yeah.
so yeah,
it's
there's
really
that.
remarkable.
The other big thing would be to do, and perhaps one of the easiest things, well, it'd still be huge amounts of work, computing power, is to do a change layer that changes between 2010 and 2020.
Mhm.
And then maybe even importing the 2000 data. But one of my favorite maps is the map from, I think, Urban Research Maps, that lets you compare 2000 to 2010, and you can
Mhm.
just you can see a slider, and you can see
Slider. Yeah.
how the neighborhood's changed. I think they were the people that I stole the color scheme, or stole some of my categories from, or borrowed. But like, I don't know, it's a classic tactic, I think, for usability, is you find someone else who's done the research, and like you copy their approach.